Let's see, we have 1.1 coming. Are we still planning to cut that today?
Yeah, I was going to bring it up on this call. Sounds good to me. I don't see any reason not to.
Okay, John says good to go. Okay, and then I think Art mentioned we have preview release notes for the standalone mode and agent gateway, like the Kubernetes mode. So if you can, if anyone's interested, you can go on the website and see all of the upcoming changes. Once we cut the release, then this will go under 1.1, but for now it's under main.
Nice. Do we not have OAuth in there?
We do for standalone. This is actually
that's Kubernetes. Okay, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. So the OIDC is under standalone. We don't have an equivalent one for
that makes sense.
Kubernetes one, but
okay, awesome. Cool. I didn't know he was working on that. That's good.
Yeah, and I think going forward, like we're just gonna keep naming them the .1s, .2, .3, like even though it's a monthly cadence, right?
Yeah.
Cool. All right. And then I think the other thing that we had on the agenda was the new features to call out. So I think I just copied from the release note. The MCP authentication on the route level, I think, is the big one to call out because now it is a breaking change, but we will have backwards compatibility for the old mode. But now, like going forward, you should configure MCP authentication at the job level, not the backend level. So I think there's a nice doc on how it's configured now. So.
A quick note on that. I think what we're missing in that release note. So it's called out as a breaking change, but like on the Kubernetes side, the breaking change is also present in the backend resource. And I think that's not in here because like that, we explicitly removed a field. John, we were talking about this earlier.
This has two different things that are very similar. There was a field that did nothing, and we removed that. And then there's and it's the same field, it's just at a different spot, both called MCP authentication. And then there's a different field that is still there, but it's not deprecated and moved. So it's technically like it shouldn't break anyone in the sense that like they had valid config that was broken. It's just now it's a YAML level breakage, not a behavioral level breakage. That makes sense. But it's very confusing because it's like the same field almost. I almost wonder if we should have not done it together. But
I'm just worried about the So I follow, and I'm going to dig up the PR. So I have the one where we moved the field that did not work at all, which was the MCP policies that existed on the MCP target, right? And that's what moved to the top level, or not the top level, but the policies field of the backend. Either way, what I'm worried about is people that had that defined, even though it didn't work, right? Because their YAML is no longer valid. Do you think that's a concern, or do you not think that's a concern?
Oh, I mean, I think 100% like it's a concern in the sense we need to call it out. Like it's
okay. Yeah. I just want to make sure that we have that like explicit for at least the Kubernetes side that, hey, this config, and we can even put in the note that even though it didn't work, you could have had valid YAML that is no longer valid.
Yep.
Would we be able to show it in the status? Because I'm thinking about like some of the examples we provided. I assume they would no longer working, but maybe still accepted by the controller.
So, well, you mean in the old version or the new version? I mean, in the new version, it can't show up in status because you can't possibly set the field. You keep going to apply it, it rejects it.
Yeah, I'm basically thinking about like we just did a new edition of our book, and in the book, I believe we were using the backend and also the auth policy.
Then the thing is, there's two different spots on backend that you could have put it, and in one of them it works, and in one of them it never, on any version of Agent Gateway, did anything at all. And so, unless your example was untested, then you're not using the bad field.
So if the example works now with the older version, it will continue to work if I'm hearing you correctly.
Exactly.
Okay, perfect.
The
Thank you.
only impact for a user could be that if they had a config that previously did nothing at all, now instead of silently doing nothing, it will explicitly be rejected when they try to apply the config.
Yep.
Okay, that's actually really good then. I missed that. I mean, I hear you all kind of discuss that, but thanks for that clarification.
So I think that's a good to do though. Like in our release notes, we should call that out.
Yeah. It's a changing the behavior and hopefully in a good way and better way.
Anything else that we want to talk about in the new features or?
Are we writing a release blog for this? Is it new enough to?
I think we probably shouldn't, because now that we're on a more frequent cadence, it's going to be a lot of release blogs. Maybe instead we can focus on specific features. But I'm open to, like, if other people think we should have a release blog, I think it's helpful, but not necessary, because these release notes are much shorter than our previous release notes that had like pages and pages.
Yeah, so I'm trying to look at the notes to see if there's anything interesting. Certainly the break change, I think it's worth highlighting, but probably not very interesting in a blog. And the browser authentication, is that something interesting?
For the OIDC?
Yeah.
I definitely think that's a highlight feature of this release, and it is interesting, but I don't think we need to write a blog post for every thing, probably. Like, I think we'll have the release notes page, and then we can just highlight that directly on socials, I would think.
Okay.
Yeah, same I think for the L4 network authorization. It has some nice implications for the Istio piece, I think, but probably not worth like having a release tied blog to that.
Okay, sounds good.
Anything else we want to bring up?
I had a quick thing. I just have a PR for Azure AI content safety guardrails that I made a couple weeks ago. I just wanted to call attention to it, to get a little pass on it.
Any volunteers to review?
Yeah, Jackson, I've been looking at it. Sorry, each time I look at it, it reminds me of something else I want to work on. And I've gotten distracted.
Yeah, no worries.
So yeah,
I'll drop it in the chat here.
I'll definitely prioritize that. I saw also, I think it was from you, right? Another one that was like rewriting the Azure one. That one I haven't looked at, but it was also work in progress. So I don't know if you want me to look at that.
Yeah, so it's almost done. And then I also have a doc PR with that. So I'll ping you when both of those are done. And then
okay, sounds good.
do your work. Thanks.
I should bring one of the things that your PR reminded me about. Yeah, nothing else on the agenda.
Okay.
Yeah, so one of the things I've been worried about, like we ran into those issues with like the CRD size, and one of the main culprits of the CRD size is we have like a double nesting of policies. And so we have policies on the back end, right? And one of the policies is guardrail, but then in the guardrail itself, you're connecting to, say, OpenAI moderation. Because you're not referencing a backend that you could put policies on, we stick another policies block inside of there for policies that apply to the moderation call. If that makes sense. So you have this kind of like n squared. Well, maybe it's not a proper n squared, but it's at least like a big fan out of all the same policies repeated over and over again. And that's one of the things Jackson's PR reminded me of, is that we're adding another guardrail. So now we add like that same exact giant block of policies again. And like if we add like 3 more guardrails, we're going to blow through the CRD limit. I was wondering if we wanted to not expose all of the policies on guardrails, and if so, like which ones would make sense to not expose. Like some of them are pretty I mean, it's tricky because if you're just calling like the real Azure one, you probably don't need any policies necessarily. Like maybe you need timeout, but you certainly don't need probably you don't need TLS settings. You don't need authentication. Like we'll just use, well, maybe you do need authentication. You probably need authentication and timeout, but you don't need, let's see if I had to listen. You probably don't need header modifiers. You definitely don't need a redirect policy. You don't need health. Doesn't make sense because there's only one endpoint. Transformations, like questionable. TCP stuff, like connection timeout, yeah, I suppose, maybe. But so I'm just wondering if like it would make sense to people to try and trim it down to kind of avoid this big fan out problem.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Break and change, but again, like it's kind of one of those things where, unlike the other one, where it was a break and change where you literally could not get the behavior, it's now one of those things where it's a breaking change, but in practical, it's probably like not impacting anyone. But some of the things, like it's tricky. Like I could say, you don't need TLS settings when you're customizing the moderation endpoint, but maybe someone's running a OpenAI moderation compatible endpoint, and then you do suddenly need, okay, now I need to customize the path, I need to customize TLS. I'm just not sure if that's worth like this big API cost that we have, which technically is not a problem. Like it's only a problem once you hit the threshold, but once you hit the threshold, then you're in deep trouble,
I mean, is there a benefit to just have moderation defined like as a standalone? I mean, the reason we have it embedded is that we're trying to inline everything.
Yeah, I guess that's true. I guess you could have, well, so the reason we didn't have a standalone was we didn't want to say, it's kind of like the AI policies where like you don't have to say, okay, OpenAI means api.openapis.com. It uses this authentication. It uses this path, like all those things. But maybe we could just have an optional backend ref. And it's like, if you want to customize things, you use the break class one, and otherwise you just use all the built-in defaults.
I actually just got confused then. The break class meaning like the underlying standalone config, or break class meaning like a standalone.
And like, okay, now you're defining not that you're calling OpenAI moderations like OpenAI.com, just an OpenAI moderations compatible API at some arbitrary host and path and that sort of thing.
Interesting. Okay. I think I need to see the example a little more, or like look at the API a little more. I will say that I am a little like the inlining stuff. I obviously get the UX improvement from that, but I guess coming from the more, I don't know if you want to call it more verbose style of like the K-gateway standalone policies, like the duplication in general, I do find a little confusing. So like, especially if this cleans up that duplication, and if we're going to need to break, the sooner the better. So like, I would say in general, I think it makes sense, but the specifics I think are where the details are where it gets tricky.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like the URL improvement that we were talking about for the job fetching. Like a lot of users really wanted an inline URL, but I think we ended up going with the backend ref because there are a lot of policies that you might want to add to that. So I think just being consistent in the code base would be nice.
Yeah, the only reason it's different, like I get what you're saying, is that in one case you're referring to like an arbitrary thing, where in OpenAI, like Google Model Armor is even more clear. Just like there's only probably one Google Model Armor. It'd be like if we had an Okta policy instead of a JOT policy, right? But I do think that it can be, we can still do like, that's, the advanced route in the default one, you just can't set policies, or maybe you can only set a very minimal set. Like I think we really do need like request timeout, but everything else is probably, well, I'll have to go review all of them, but I think everything else is starting to border on definitely not needed. Oh, one thing I forgot, by the way, is it's not just that you have multiple guardrails. You have like triple nested loop because you have groups of AI providers, and then within the groups there's a list of AI providers, and then within that you have a list of policies or of guardrails. So that's like you have that 3-layer nesting. So it's very easy to exceed the cell budget.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll put something together, something more concrete, but it sounds like there's at least this is the direction that sounds good.
Yep, sounds good. Any other things we want to discuss?
Just really quick related to that, one of the things that I think we talked about this a couple times, but related to like change logs and stuff, without going into like the details of the change log, like as we start looking at more breaks, I think just making sure we have a way to track them, so we don't have to like manually go back and see what we pushed as a break will be helpful. So I think we may have some proposals to bring kind of what we did with K-Gateway, to Agent Gateway. Hopefully it's not, hopefully it's not as much of like there's a very low barrier, but it is, a little bit more friction, I guess you could say, on the PR than was before. So we'll have to consider it, obviously, but like having a way to track breaks and making sure that they are front and center will be useful, especially as we start talking about a few more of them.
Yeah, it's a good call out. Very relevant to the release.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, on that note, I think if there's nothing else, we can end a little early. Happy release day, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.